say the last part again?
Well, the best people are here. How about that?
Where is she?
No, who said let me share? Tell I got some.
Was the weather good?
Good evening. I'd like to call our Tucson Unified School District Governing Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ravi,
Here.
Ms. Luna Rose,
Here.
Ms. Shaw,
Here.
Mr. Romero,
Here.
Ms. Ekstrom.
Here. Let the record reflect that all members are present. Next is our land acknowledgement statement and our Pledge of Allegiance. That is given by Madison Chavez. Madison is in the 8th grade at McGee Middle School. Madison is an outstanding 8th grade student from McGee Middle School who exemplifies academic excellence, leadership, and creativity. Madison's dedication to her studies shines through her consistent placement on the honor roll. She currently serves as the co-president of the Student Council, where she helps lead school initiatives and represents her classmates with confidence and care. Madison is also a valued member of the girls' soccer team, where she brings energy, teamwork, and determination to every game. Beyond her school responsibilities, Madison is a passionate reader and writer. She's also a talented artist, spending some of her free time drawing and sketching. A devoted Star Wars fan, Madison is a guiding force within her school, demonstrating leadership, focus, and a sense of purpose that elevates those around her. Thank you for being here, Madison. You can start.
With the pledge? Okay. This one first?
Yes,
Okay,
the land
sorry.
acknowledgement first.
On behalf of the governing board of the Tucson Unified School District, I, Madison Chavez, acknowledge that the schools, buildings, and facilities of the Tucson Unified School District reside on the ancestral homeland of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the federally recognized tribal land of the Pascua Yaqui tribe.
Thank you, Madison. Next, if we can all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And you can start when you're ready.
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Madison. I hope you have a great upcoming school year.
Thank you.
Next is agenda adjustments. Dr. Trujillo?
President Ekstrom, members of the board, there are no recommended agenda adjustments this evening.
Next is the superintendent's report.
Yes, President Ekstrom, members of the governing board, a very brief report, mostly for the public. For those of you in the viewing public, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about the impact that the June 30th announcement by the Arizona Department of Education that the U.S. Department of Education would be suspending federal grant funds to K-12 districts across the state of Arizona and across the nation. That will impact TUSD to the tune of $6 million in the categories of Title II, which deals with teacher professional development and training, Title III, which provides valuable resources and training for teachers working with students whose primary home language is other than English, supporting our English language learner programs, Title IV, which supports student support services, and the most direct impact is our 21st century academic learning program that supports academic intervention and after-school programming in 23 schools across the district. We are, as an administration, working very, very hard right now to come up with a contingency plan from all of those parents that count on us at those 23 schools to provide after-school care for their kids. We expect that by the end of next week, we will be communicating our plan to provide continuity of service. We know that the first day of school is coming, and we are in a rush to make sure that we at least cover the first month of school for after-school care for our parents. So be looking forward to that at the end of next week. For all of our employees, we're continuing to meet individually with each affected employee to make sure that they understand very clearly what their options are in the district with regard to existing vacancies. It is unfortunate that we are dealing with this type of a cut at this time in the school year. However, we're going to work very, very hard to make sure that we minimize the disruption to our schools and our school communities. That's all for the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Next is call to the audience. Dr. Shaw.
Public participation at board meetings. Members of the public may speak during the call to the audience. The governing board clerk shall be responsible for recognizing speakers and for maintaining order where it may be appropriate. Those who speak in person or want to have their comments read shall email or call the board office or complete a request to address the board form before the meeting. Speakers who have not completed a request form are not permitted to address the board. The speaker must state their full name and topic prior to addressing the board. Speakers are encouraged to be brief with a maximum time of 3 minutes. While more than one speaker may speak together and the time allowed, speakers are reminded that they are not allowed to speak more than once, and they may not transfer or delegate their time to others. If there are documents for the board, please give them to the board office staff, and they will ensure each board member receives a copy. Those attending the meeting and or speaking before the board shall observe rules of good conduct. Speakers shall also refrain from inappropriate or slanderous remarks. And because TUSD serves students from preschool through high school, speakers should be aware there may be children present and listening. At the end of the call to the audience, the governing board president will ask if any board member wishes to respond to criticism, wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. No more than 2 members may address each topic. Contents of this card are public information. We have 2 speakers in person and none to be read. We'll start with Jacqueline Lopez, followed by Lillian Fox. Jacqueline Lopez is not here. Lillian Fox is also not here, so it looks like that concludes call to the audience.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Item number 5.1, approval of the revised extracurricular activities fee schedule, including authorization for principals to waive fees in case we Dr. Trujillo.
President, actual members of the governing board, as requested by Board Member Shaw, we are going to review not only the specific fees that we do ask of our students and our parents, but also the revenue that we saw in the last fiscal year from the fees as the board considers this item. Here to walk us through the information, answer any questions, is Mr. Hernandez, our Chief Financial Officer.
Good evening, board members. So yeah, as Dr. Trujillo mentioned, per the request from Ms. Shaw, we've went back and redlined everything, provided you with a recap of all of the revenues across all of the different programs. Those are in your board agenda item. So I don't know if you have any specific questions in regards to any of the information that's been revised.
Yes, Ms. Shaw.
Thank you for providing more information on this item. I didn't notice any particular information in one of the attachments that spoke to how much money each school, or just like a grand total for how much principals had waived fees. Do you have that information?
I don't have the waivers of the fees. I only provided the revenues collected across the multiple programs. But I did not collect information in regards to waivers.
Oh.
I do know, I can tell you that EEF provided about $100,000 last year in scholarships, specifically for interscholastics and other programs, but mostly for the interscholastics. That's where the majority of those kind of waivers, if you will, come from. So,
From EEF,
From
not
EEF.
our actual school
Right,
sites.
yeah,
Because I
right.
know, like, when you look at the agenda item that includes all of the donations for each school, some of these schools have quite a bit of money, and for the attachment that I'm looking at now, there's, $800,000 in all the pots for each school's extracurricular activity programs. And I know that fluctuates during the school year, but there are some schools that have like 27,000 for their day program, 250,000. Well, that's AP tests, but some have a lot, and I'm glad that there's an ability for students to get a scholarship for any of our activities. But I still would really like to push that we have it be something that's optional. And I guess I should have asked this when it came to us last time. Like, I wonder how much each school generates for like each particular program. I know that we have the information here, but I don't know. I know they do fundraisers too. I just wonder if like the district could put in a line item where we would have like a $200,000 or so fund for sports, at least. Maybe not, day trips or like travel across the country. I feel like that would be an incentive for families to bring their students to TUSD if we could promote like free sports. So yeah, I may have to vote no on this simply out of principle that I am for no fees for sports and like the very cheap clubs that range from like $2 to $30, depending on the club.
Mr. Romero?
So, my thought on this is because there is a reason for these fees. Paying of like referees, like at our football games, because I know they're not doing it for free. We have to contract those on out. Other than the football, we're doing the same, I'm guessing, for soccer, baseball, all our different sports. So a lot of that money that's coming in, make sure I understand this correctly, a lot of that money is helping to offset the cost for those schools for the refs that they need.
Yeah, the revenues specifically for interscholastics do not cover, it's really just an offset, mostly, as you said, Mr. Romero, for the officiating, right? For the refs, for football, basketball, soccer, especially the AIA sports in the high schools. So it helps to just offset a lot of those costs, sometimes in the middle and the elementary schools, for some of the officiating, some of the supplies, but it's nowhere near. The interscholastics department receives its own budget for transportation for the student athletes, for reconditioning for helmets and uniforms. And then on top of that, the high schools in particular, and actually all the schools, receive some form of extra duty stipends for coaches, whether they be the athletic, the interscholastic coaches, or the club sponsors. So we do provide contributions and funding to operate student activities in interscholastics outside of just student fees. Student fees, if, for lack of a better term, it's really just skin in the game, right? It's just that's kind of what I've termed it. But I understand Ms. Shaw's point in terms of trying to generate more interest through enrollment by creating free programming.
Right, and I think that premise of that is really good, but again, the reality is this cost to go along with it, well, that'll cost the district a little bit more. Now, just a quick question, so say like, I was looking like Tucson High's football, they get more money than the Rincon High football comes on, and I guess more participation. Does that money always stay with the school, or does it come into a pot to help out? If so, it's like Tucson High's playing Rincon pays for those refs, and vice versa? Or
It depends on who's the host, right? Who the host is, but we get charged by AIA specifically for high schools. So there'll be a fee that generally is split between the teams that gets paid to AIA directly. But more directly to your question, the fees that are collected by Tucson High's football team stays at Tucson High, can only be used for the Tucson High program, as well as any other, so they can't commingle across schools.
Ms. Shaw?
So to piggyback off of Mr. Romero's questioning, AIA charges us for things like referees and other things.
Yes.
But what I've heard from speaking with the Booster Club at Tucson High, who deals with their football team, is that when you're going to a game and you are charged an admission price, that money doesn't go to that sports team, it goes to AIA, right?
No, that money, so gate fees are collected by the schools. They stay at the schools. It's part of their auxiliary operations. I mean, at least in TUSD, that's the way we do it. I mean, I can't speak for other school districts that may be collecting gate fees that then they use to offset the general operations of interscholastics. We don't do that. The gate fees for the different sports that do have an entrance fee stay at the schools for the operation of those programs.
Okay, well, I might be mistaken, but I think what they were telling me is that it doesn't directly go to that football program, for instance, like it goes to the student council typically.
Yeah, it'll go into just the gate receipts, and then the school has discretion for how to use it, which it could be for student council. It literally opens up their ability to have essentially unrestricted funds from those gate fees. So it could go to student council, it could go back to the teams. It really is at the discretion of the school where those gate fees are going to go back to.
Okay,
So,
thank you. So each school site decides where their gate fees go.
correct. Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's too bad that it doesn't go to that actual sport, because they could use that for, things like scholarships or helping families purchase shoes or
And
whatnot.
because, to one of your point, because the funds are unrestricted, that actually is another source of funding where the principal could provide scholarships for kids, because it doesn't have a restriction. So if they're trying to figure out like, hey, where can I provide a scholarship to a football player? You can pull $60 out of the gate fees auxiliary fund if that's an option for you. So that becomes kind of an option as well. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily go back to the sport that's hosting the event.
Okay. Well, thank you for the information. As I said, because, you said a lot of these fees are really just to show that the student has skin in the game and is going to, attend every practice and so on and so forth. I would really like to see TUSD move to make school fees or sports fees optional for each of the levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. So I guess I will move to make fees for sports in elementary, middle, and high school optional.
The motion dies for lack of a second. Dr. Shaw?
I'll move the item as presented.
I'll second. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? I would just like to say that I would like to have fees optional, but I understand why the schools need it. But I think we need to look further, because we do have kids who cannot participate because they don't have shoes, they don't have socks, they don't have the materials necessary, like shin guards and that kind of thing. So I don't know how we would focus on those kinds of extras, but I would like to see that maybe next year, and how we could do that. And then maybe I could support, fees being optional. But I think if we truly want kids to be able to participate, we need to look at those things too, because that's a barrier, quite frankly.
That might be a conversation with EEF.
Yeah, so that's just my 2 cents on that.
Thank you for mentioning that. I mean, yeah, this opens up a can of worms, because it's not just the fee, it's the shoes, it's the shin guards and all of that. And I mean, my hope is that if families knew that they didn't have to pay that, maybe it would be easier for them to fit the bill for the other equipment that goes along with some participation in sports.
Ms. Luna Rose?
I just wanted to make mention that I do agree with Ms. Shaw and, doing the optional, but we're just in a position right now that we can't. I'll just speak as a band parent. Band camp started at Rincon yesterday, and the amount of money that I've put down for band camp and other fees that I'm seeing right here. Now, band camps, it's sort of a different thing, but I feel like just adding extra fee, kids who want to participate in marching band, whether it's at Rincon or Tucson High or Sabino, are not able to. So I'd like to see something where we can get to a place next year that we can vote and I can support an optional program.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the public hearing for fiscal year 25-26 Tucson Unified School District Annual Expenditure Budget. Dr. Trujillo?
Okay. Yes, at our final governing board meeting in June, the board had an opportunity to adopt a proposed budget, which has since been posted publicly now for almost about a month. Tonight, the governing board, the action requested is to formally adopt a final budget. So before public comment opens, I've asked our chief financial officer, Mr. Hernandez, to review one more time the final proposed budget. Mr. Hernandez?
Good evening, board members. So yeah, this is the adopted budget for fiscal year 26. It is essentially identical to the proposed budget that we discussed last month. I've provided some additional information since some of the items have changed. Obviously, since we last met, the legislature passed a budget about 3 days before the end of the fiscal year. But nevertheless, we're required to adopt using the proposed budget. So that is a statutory requirement. We will then be allowed to then go back and revise the budget. So our plan is to come back to you in August with a revision that incorporates the new budget limits that the state legislature adopted. We have until September 15th to do that. But legally, we're required to use the same budget limit that was in the proposed budget. Just to provide you kind of an overview of what the legislature and the governor approved on June 27th. So as expected, there was a 2% increase to the base support level, so about an additional $100 per ADM. One of the things that was surprising is the not one-time funds, apparently now it's two-time funds for free and reduced lunch came back. So $37 million was approved. We were not expecting those. Those are new funds, as well as the one-time funds for district additional assistance. Those were renewed. There was a renewal of the state aid supplement for Prop 123. That one hinges essentially on the legislature to decide if they want to implement that, since we are now beyond the 10th year of Prop 123. There was a creation of what is now called the 9th grade on-track grant program with a $3.4 million appropriation. It essentially is a program that will work with students to get them on track to graduate from high school in 4 years. And I know that we're looking into the details behind that. There is now a requirement by next year that all high school campuses and all high school athletic events need to have AEDs. Fortunately, with bond dollars, we are 100% compliant with this requirement. In fact, we were highlighted during the legislative hearing in regards to the AED requirement. There will be a $500,000 statewide grant that will be distributed to schools. So we're expecting, some dollars to come through to support the Health Services Department, which maintains the AEDs across our campuses. There was a renewal of the $3.8 million that helps to pay for the cost of students who are eligible for reduced lunch, so that they don't have to pay for anything. Obviously, in TUSD, we're very fortunate to be 100% free. So this is really for school districts that don't have CEP, where their students have to pay something out of pocket. The state will now cover that. ADE is going to commission a teacher retention study throughout the fall to essentially talk about what's going on with our teachers in regards to retention and recruitment in the classrooms. And they allocated some dollars behind that project. And a $200 million allocation, this tends to be an annual allocation of building renewal fund money. You know, you see those items come to you every so often for some of the projects that we've applied for. Just to kind of point this out, this money tends to run out in the month of March. So a lot of this money is going to be used for projects that we've applied for that just have not been funded from basically April through June. So there's a lot of IOUs around the state. $200 million is definitely not enough, but we're fortunate that they continue to renew this building renewal grant. So these are the major legislative initiatives that were adopted for K-12 specifically. In terms of the impact to TUSD, so the 2% increase to the base support level results in about $6.6 million coming down from this increase. The one-time state supplement for free and reduced price lunch students, it's about $2 million. This is an estimate because it is based on our proportion of students who are eligible for National School Lunch Program, and that count they'll do that count twice over the next school year. This is the amount that we received at the end of fiscal year 25. And then the district additional assistance or capital state aid supplement, just about $993,000. And then the Prop 123 state aid supplement. So all told, about $12.3 million. Some of these, specifically the last three items, are essentially renewals of money that we've already been receiving. So it is not new money. It is something that we were not necessarily expecting would come back, but has returned. Really, the new money is that 2% increase to the base support level. So this is what the adopted looks like to the revision from May, from last fiscal year. As you'll notice, there's really not a change overall to the limits. We're still adopting a budget of $380,788,858, about a $19.4 million decrease to the May budget. The capital budget is about $3.9 million short of the fiscal year 25 budget, so we're asking for you to approve an adoption of $17.3 million for unrestricted capital outlay. Essentially, these numbers are identical to what you saw during the proposed budget hearing in the month of June. The total operating budget, $737.2 million, just about $21 million short of the last fiscal year. The most significant change is going to be in bond building, essentially. We continue to have a $71 million fund in there. Our federal programs, there's a decrease of $8.4 million, nearly $8.4 million in federal programs. That does not account for the loss of the $6 million from the freeze from the federal government. That accounts for just the loss of dollars based on allocations received as of the end of June. So once we know more in terms of what the federal government will do with the other programming, that obviously that number will change significantly once we have that information, but that is definitely something we were not expecting would take place. Property taxes, there is a small change to property taxes. So last go around, I told you that our total property tax levy would decrease just over $9. And in fact, now we are slated to decrease our property tax levy by over $11 compared to last year. So a homeowner with basically a $200,000 home will pay about $404 across both levies, about $11 less than last year. And that does include the adjacent ways valuation or levy, which I will talk about in a subsequent presentation, but essentially everything else remains the same except for the fact that we've been able to reduce the total levy by about $2 more for homeowners. And finally, this is just an updated 5-year projection summary so that the community can see kind of where we're tracking in regards to dollars and cents outlays that are kind of going out. As you can see, these projections do not, they include the supplemental state aid that we are currently receiving. We're projecting to receive Prop 123 one more year If that changes, certainly that number would be welcome. But after 27, we don't see any supplemental state aid coming in to support us. The base revenues include a 1.5% year-over-year decrease in the average daily membership. So even though that number is going up, it's going up because there's an inflation factor in there. It's 2% for 26 and 27. It will drop to about 1% in 28, 29, and 30. You'll see the reductions, about $8.5 million in reductions that were approved for this fiscal year that our departments across the district implemented for fiscal year 26. So we continue to carry that forward. We are still transferring $10 million from capital to essentially to bolster M&O. That is something that I will tell you is concerning, because we continue to have preventative maintenance needs that cannot be addressed through bond funding, that we need to be addressed through routine maintenance, and the capital budget is not really built right now to sustain that. So that in the near future will have to be addressed. Our carry forward continues to decline as we continue to rely on it for ongoing expenses. So all told, by the end of fiscal year 30, we currently have an $82 million deficit that will need to be fixed. As I've mentioned before, we have a structural deficit of about $20 million on average that we need to cure in order to really change the direction of the projection, whether it's on the expense side or on the revenue side. Really would be increases from the state legislature or increases in the average daily membership through the enrollment process. So this is just, I wanted to make sure that you and the community were aware of what we're tracking for over the next 5 years. So. Just quick next steps. We will submit this budget if you adopt it today before the 18th. We are planning on coming back to you on August 12th with the revised FY26 budget for your consideration. That'll include all of the items that the legislature adopted on June 27th. We are currently looking at bringing the annual financial report for fiscal year 25 to officially close the financial period of fiscal year 25 at your October 14th meeting. It is due October 15th. And it is still our plan to publish a final budget book that includes the revised budget limits from August 12th and the final fund balances from October 15th, no later than November 30th. So the budget book that is in your board agenda item incorporates everything that we know as of today, which is essentially does not include any of the legislative changes that took place. So, but as an information item, I know that was a request to provide some form of a budget book to you and to the community. So that is included. But our final version will be done by the end of November. And that's it.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the public hearing. Members of the public may speak during the fiscal year 25-26 annual expenditure public hearing portion of the agenda. Board president or board clerk shall be responsible for recognizing speakers and for maintaining proper order by setting such limitations that may be appropriate. Speakers during the public hearing should restrict their remarks to topics related to the fiscal year 25-26 annual expenditure budget. Speakers are encouraged to be brief, maximum of 3 minutes. Individuals speaking before the board shall observe rules of propriety and good conduct and refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. We have one person, Lillian Fox.
Board and board president, and Yolanda Barbo, superintendent, and Councilor Ross. I gave you a little thing about what I'm going to talk about. As you know, budgets show the available funds and the plan to spend the money. The presentation he gave you has only what the funds are, not a word about where the money is going to be spent. That's kind of a problem. Now, in order to have improvement in this district, and we've got a lot we need to improve, we got to have a strategic plan. you also have to have a budget that aligns with your strategic plan. You can have a plan, but if you don't have any money in the budget for it, it's a problem. And your budget really is your strategy. You have to know where the money is going to be spent in order to tell if you're supporting some sort of strategy. Now, TUSD, 73% of the students are not proficient in ELA, 79% are not proficient in math, and we have a 34.6% of our students are chronically truant. So we got some serious places where we need to be spending money and taking action and having plans to improve those things. We're a terrible district. We have more money than any local district, but we have the next to the worst performance. We have more money than any of the large districts except for one, but we have the next to the worst performance. Our money is not lined up with any kind of strategy. We have more money than the average for Arizona, but our performance numbers are way worse than average for Arizona, which is hard to believe because Arizona is not real great. We don't have a spending plan that aligns with any kind of strategy. 7.1 has 2 reports, and he's talking about what you got to approve. 2 of them are not budgets. They're state reports. They're labeled budgets. They're always labeled budgets, but if you look at them, they're not budgets. You have to have somebody spend a lot of time explaining to you what the heck is in those things, because there are a whole bunch of formulas that underlie that. CFOs typically know how to produce the numbers based on the budget. They're not budgets. They're based on the budget, but they're not the budget. Your budget book is your budget. This year's budget book shows that elementary schools are being cut by $31 million. Last year, they were cut by $30 million. So that means over 2 years, the elementary schools have lost $61 million. That is a heck of a lot. They've lost, during that time, they lost 500, if I'm reading my writing right, 558 employees. Our elementary schools are in terrible shape. We have awful performance, and yet we're busy cutting, employees right and left. On the other hand, the department this year got, let's see if I can find the number.
Your time has expired, Ms. Fox. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the public hearing. Next is 7.1, adoption of the fiscal year 25-26 Tucson Unified School District Annual Expenditure Budget. Dr. Trujillo, Mr.
I'll
Hernandez.
take any questions at this point. This is for the next one.
Any questions, governing board members?
No, I'll move the item.
Ms. Shaw?
Sorry.
Or can I get a second first?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Ms. Shaw?
Sorry, I thought Val was going to speak. Mr. Hernandez, can you speak to Ms. Fox's account of the $31 million that has been cut from elementary schools?
So that is a result of reductions in allocations to classrooms based on decreases in enrollment. So when we move FTEs out of schools, specifically as part of their enrollment and projected enrollment for 25-26, we're closing those FTEs. I mean, the majority is people. So they're losing funding for people. Some of them are DSEG positions that were closed from departments that actually closed positions that were assigned to elementary schools. So it is not a cut in their budget. It is a reduction as it relates to their specific projected enrollment. Now, we do fall equalization. That is an internal process that we take care of in the month of August. We take a look at what enrollment is doing after February. So we take a look at the 100th day as a projection. If their enrollment is increasing, we will put those FTEs back. So there are schools currently, for example, in fact, I was talking to the principal at Calont today, was allocated 15 FTEs. She's actually slated to go up to 16. Her enrollment has moved up. So she lost an FTE, we'll gain that back because her enrollment is actually moving in the right direction. So it is a cut directly related to how we allocate teachers, staffing correlated specifically to enrollment.
Okay, and then the 558 employees that's related to that number, that is all due to enrollment? Because that still seems pretty high.
Some of it isn't, those are FTEs. They're not people, they're not specific, but they're not number, head count. Those are full-time equivalents, so some of them may be a 0.2, a 0.3. It's a sum of the entire district. Obviously, we've got about 7,000 FTE that we're still maintaining. Some of those positions are closed positions that are related also to federal grants. So there was a reduction, as you know, in Title I that we received. We've gone down to about $22 million. There are a lot of those positions that existed from Title I. So some of those have been closed. Some teaching positions have been closed. DSEG actually had some closure in some positions. It seems like a large number. It is not head count. It is FTE. It's full-time equivalent. Some may be full-time positions. I couldn't tell you specifically how many of those are 1.0, but some of them are fractions of full-time equivalent.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. O'Mara.
All right, so I've got a bunch of questions on that 133-page document. We're going to start with page 1. Just kidding, it's 24. On that, I just wanted to know the difference. On it, it talks about alternative schools. And then on that, mentions Mary Meredith, teenage pregnancy. But it has Tucson Virtual Academy and Tucson Unified Virtual Academy. What are the differences there?
They're the same one. We just didn't combine them. But that's just a collapse of not combining the two schools. It's the same school. It's just that it's a pivot table in Excel, and because one is named one thing and one has a different name, it didn't merge the names together.
Okay.
That's what it is, but it's the same school. It's
Okay.
Tucson Virtual Academy.
So what are purchase services?
Those are generally contracted services of any kind. They may be either for consulting, or it may be for contract services related to repairs or rentals, things of that nature. So it runs a whole host of it. In addition to that, this is where all the leased employees in the district are accounted for. So all the employees that we hire through ESI, because they're not direct employees, they're coded as leased, which is a purchase service, which is probably why you see such a significant number there in that 6,300, is the fact that the majority of those ESI employees, essentially they're budgeted in that line item specifically.
Okay, because I noticed that there's kind of a consistency in the middle where a lot of these schools are. How do they qualify for these purchase services? Because I was looking, Monzo was the highest one at 113,549. Mission View was at 650, and then we have a handful of schools that didn't have any money allotted towards purchase services.
So not knowing specifically about those campuses, it could be a variety of things, right? So I mentioned leased employees, right? So if they have leased employees, leased teachers is specifically, right? Retirees who've returned to work that we've leased through ESI, it depends on how much we're paying them, right? So the value of a teacher at Monzo that got hired versus the value of the teacher at Mission View is not the same, right? So they're compensated based on how human resources determines the compensation for those people. We budget those dollars for those positions. In terms of everything outside of the leased employee, it really is dependent on what services those specific schools are looking for outside of leased employees, if any. So I don't know if Monzo, for example, is specifically budgeting for, let's say, a consultant of some sort. And they have to go through a procurement process in order to get some sort of consulting approved and brought into the district and paid for, whether it be through M&O, it could be through Title I, it could be through any other funding source. I can tell you that in some cases, some schools just don't spend on any of that. They don't have leased employees, they don't hire outside consultants or contract services. It really is dependent on the unique circumstance of that campus. I mean, I could certainly go back and tell you what it is for Monzo. That is just one category. I think that's the benefit of the digital budget book, is you would be able to break it down to that level of detail versus this one. That's not really what this one is intended for. But if you want the detail of what those are, we can certainly provide you detail of what specifically is happening like at Monzo or Mission View or any of the other 88 schools.
And is it capped at all, a certain how much money they can spend, or is it just based on the school's requested needs?
Yeah, it's based on their capacity. So there is no cap. It's based on their capacity on what they want to spend. Most of them, like I said, will spend through federal programs, specifically Title I. Those Title I dollars are attached to their comprehensive needs plan that they have to put together every year in order to spend Title I dollars. So they're correlated to specific metrics, especially in English language arts and mathematics, in order to spend Title I. And some of them, they may be hiring a consultant to come in and do professional development on how to do K-3 literacy, let's say, using Title I dollars. But they make that determination at the site level. We give that, essentially that autonomy to the principal.
And then do we audit those after the fact? Just because I noticed, well, again, Monzo had 113,000, where some other schools are 51,000, 48,000, 34,000. So how do we go check to see exactly what they spent that all on and that they're using it financially responsible?
Well, their request, so let's say if you want to bring that consultant to do like early elementary literacy, for example, they have to submit that request, that proposal to, particularly in the case of a school, a regional assistant superintendent to review that. They determine if it's appropriate use of the dollars. We don't audit it on the back end, right? When they submit a requisition for a purchase order, they can only purchase the service that purchase order has been developed for. So if they choose not to spend it, they can cancel that purchase order. The dollars revert back to the school for some other use. Certainly, even though those dollars are allocated now, over the course of the year, schools as well as departments have the ability to adjust their budgets, which is why when we come back, like in December and we do a budget revision, some of those dollars will change because they may have decided, I don't need this, or I want to spend it on a supply budget, or I want to spend it on an actual full-time teacher versus a leased teacher, or whatever the case may be. So budgets are snapshots in time, but from a practical perspective, they're generally fluid based on the needs of the organization.
Okay. Another question, supplies. What are they?
Everything. It can be from pencils, markers. It can be all the way up to supplies related to hardware. So mice, cabling for printers. It could be custodial supplies as well. So it's really anything that is a consumable item that will be consumed in less than a year. So a supply would not be a book or a laptop or a textbook, for example. It would be something as basic as the pencils that are in front of you, the bottles of water that you're drinking from. Those are consumable supplies. So we categorize it as a supply. There are subcategories of supplies that we keep in our chart of accounts, though.
And is there, again, a certain formula on what schools get so much money for their different supplies?
So office supplies, which we call principal supplies, classroom supplies, there is a formula for those, and janitorial supplies. And it is based on the enrollment. There is a per pupil allocation that every school will get. And they get that, that amount of money. Again, the principal has discretion to use those dollars as they see fit. So if we allocate a certain number of dollars for custodial supplies and they don't need as much toilet paper as they thought, they could certainly move that custodial supply to, to buy more of something else, some other type, maybe a classroom supply or a classroom aid.
Okay, and then based on these numbers, because I just got a couple of schools on one of the sheets regarding like 24, 25, their last day amount on these 26 adopted budget ones. So like just this situation, Dodge has 412 students. Their supplies is 50,000 plus. Doolin 473, but they're half as much. They're 25,239. And then Gridley 484, they're at 34,879. So they're above everybody, but they're kind of getting the middle number there. So that's what I was just trying to figure out what the. I just took a small sampling of these three because they were one over the other and they were similar sized schools.
Yeah, and that's the sum total of everything across their funding sources for supplies. So, for example, you mentioned Dodge and Doolin. They may be getting the same amount for office supplies and custodial and classroom supplies, but it may be that they may be adding title supplies, Title I supplies or supplies that they're going to buy from somewhere else. Dodge may have access to more dollars than Doolin may have access to more dollars. That's the sum total. I could break it down and tell you, here's what they get by formula and here's everything else that's extraneous to Dodge and Doolin in your example. But They all are based on the same per pupil amount. They get that dollar amount. If they're tacking stuff on, that is above and beyond the formula that the board has set.
I'm learning a lot today, thank you. Another question was, when I was going through it, all the schools were up front, and then we went through from page 24 to 37 was other departments, and then the K-6 started on page 37. Why was that not right after all the other schools?
It's just, again, the imperfections of using Excel is just the way that it organized itself. We didn't move the whole block of K6s right after the K5s. In the digital budget book, that won't happen because we're able to drag and drop. We can't really do that very easily with Excel. It's something that we could do. We didn't want to mess up with all the columns, but
Okay,
it's the
I just
imperfection of
wasn't
Excel.
sure, 'cause I was like, where's Collier, where's Kellen?
Yeah, no, that's the imperfection of using manual entry with Excel.
Got it.
Yeah.
And one more here. So I was looking at, we're just going to go the advertising, and it's in DSEG, and I noticed Dodge had 1,000, Mansfield had 1,000, Palo Verde had 9,000, Bonilla 6,000, Tucson High 10,000. How are they allowed to use, I guess, advertising money in DSEG? Do they just allot it for there? And is there certain criteria for this advertising? And how do we view their return on investment on their advertising that they're using?
Those are all magnet schools. That's why they're able to use for advertising, and their metric would be, how many magnet applications do they get coming into those campuses?
Awesome. Thank you, Ricky.
You're welcome.
Ms. Shaw?
Thanks for all the questions, Val. On that whole line about supplies, I noticed that for employee benefits, there was almost $29 million listed for supplies.
Employee benefits
Yeah.
has supplies. Those are.
Would that be to subsidize a benefit plan or what?
What? Yeah, I don't know what page you're looking at off the top of my head.
Scroll up.
Benefits are coded to the departments where they take place. We have the Employee Benefits Trust. They have some supplies. The Benefits Trust has supplies because we have a benefits department that we pay for out of EBT.
Page 26 of the budget book.
Gene, can you put up the budget book real quick? Yeah, the big PDF, and turn it to page 26, please. And then 26,
26.
please. No, not that. You had the other budget book, but if we could look at page 26 of that book.
Yeah, scroll down a little bit more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
scroll down.
please. So, yeah, 28.
Yeah, that is I don't know what that $28 million is in supplies. Because they don't have $28 million worth of supplies. What they pay for out of there are the claims, and I'm wondering if claims are coded to a code. So all our supply codes start with 66. So I'm wondering if all the claims that we pay out of EBT are coded to a supply line versus a contract line. So I'd have to go back and take a look at that specific line item because there are not $28 million in supplies in the benefits.
Dr. Trujillo?
Yeah, Gene, if you go to page 92, there's actually a cleaner layout of employee benefits and what we pay in claims and district supplies and other fees.
Yeah, so those are the specific line items. I mean, the majority are claims, right? We process because we're a self-insured, we process all the claims, the medical claims and the pharmacy claims for all of our employees who carry a plan with us. I'm just curious why we would code them to a supply, but I'll have to go back to our accounting staff and figure out why they're using a supply line. But ultimately, it is to pay for the claims, as it says there, claims, medical claims, pharmacy.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, yeah, because that did seem very odd to me.
Yeah.
And then I would just like to point my colleagues, and maybe since we're here, Jean, if you can scroll back up to page 29, the interscholastic totals. They're receiving almost 1.5 million. Supplies is 42,000, but miscellaneous is 780,000. Not to mention purchase services of 200,000, which I would assume would go towards like referees, things like that.
So the officiating fees would be in that miscellaneous line item. The purchase services, a lot of that is contracted transportation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Contracted transportation,
so
not our own buses?
Sometimes it is, sometimes it will include the yellow buses, our yellow buses. Sometimes it will be, when their yellow buses are not available, it will be a charter bus.
And is that more expensive than just getting our own bus? And
It
stuff?
is. Honestly, that would depend on transportation's availability to have a yellow bus. I couldn't speak to when that case would be, though.
Dr. Trio?
There are mileage requirements with AIA. When you're going out of town, you do have to use a charter. It has to have bathrooms. That's when we're forced to pay. But when you're within a certain parameter of mileage, we use our own in-house yellow buses. So that's, the majority of the expenses are when we actually have to, like band competitions in Flagstaff, or, the football team goes over to Yuma. And then, of course, for, I think referees, like you said, are also in that mix.
Right.
Okay, yeah, well, knowing all this and seeing it before our eyes, I do hope that this board will continue to move towards making sports optional for students, because it does help a lot of kids like stay on track as far as their GPA. Talking to the coach at Tucson High's football team, like they have the highest GPA they've ever had on average, and so it really helps kids find their niche in a school and stay focused on academics.
Mr. Romero?
Just real quick, so I understand the other ones here. So property, what was property referring to? Because I saw those numbers all over the place
Capital.
also.
That's capital. Yeah.
All right. And then miscellaneous, what's listed under
It
miscellaneous?
could be anything. I mean, so that's, so we've got a coding call that starts with a 6-8, and those are either fees, like membership fees or dues, officiating fees. So that, more than likely, that $180 in language acquisition is a membership fee of some sort. Okay. To an organization, like a professional development organization.
So there was a motion made by Dr. Shaw and seconded by Ms. Luna Rose. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Next is our Truth in Taxation public hearing for fiscal year 25-26, adjacent ways property tax levy. Dr. Trujillo?
I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hernandez. We are seeking an additional levy for adjacent ways. Those are funds levied from the public specifically for improvements and enhancements to areas of ingress and egress, entrance points, exit points on all of our campuses. Also, for the board's convenience and for the public, we've attached a list of proposed projects that we plan to accomplish with adjacent ways fundings this fiscal year. Mr. Hernandez.
Yeah. So, as Dr. Trujillo mentioned, this is specifically a truth in taxation hearing for the adjacent ways tax levy. This levy and the specific tax rate was part of the previous presentation, so you saw it there. As was mentioned, every school district who is going to levy any amount in adjacent ways is required to have a truth in taxation hearing. We are also required to publish a notice that cannot be in the legal classifieds ads. at least 10 days, no more than 20 days before the hearing, so before today. We published on July 5th. It was inside cover, I think, page 3 of Section A of the Daily Star. The format of the publication, essentially the language is prescribed by state law. So the language that was published is exactly the language that statute tells us to provide to the community. So adjacent ways, just as some background, some of you are familiar with it. It provides for improvements, maintenance, and construction of, as Dr. Trujillo mentioned, some form of egress or ingress to one of our school properties. So public roads that are adjacent to our schools, intersections that meet our property within a quarter of a block, or anything that it relates to safe entry or exit to a public road. So I know last time Mr. Romero asked about bus bays, bus pullouts. That would be one of those projects, and some of those are actually listed in that listing. We're allowed to use it to construct sidewalks, sewers, utility lines, roadways. We have used some of this adjacent waste funding to do some sewer work. Most recently at Tucson High, when they actually had the break in their sewer line, we accessed some adjacent waste dollars in order to repair some of that. All of the projects have to be vetted and approved by the Arizona Facilities Board, and I provided a link for you and the community to look at what we've submitted in the past. But they have to basically say, yes, this is adjacent waste eligible before we can move forward with the project. In order for us to even do that, we have to basically provide them a scope of work, what we're doing, where we're doing it, quotes, a whole lot of documentation has to go to SFB before we move forward with any adjacent waste project. So we can't spend anything until SFB gives us the okay. In terms of tax rate and levy, we're asking for a levy of $2 million. The total budget for adjacent waste is $3 million, so we've got about $1 million and change in cash sitting in the fund today. We need an additional $2 million in order to complete the projects that are outlined today. For a $100,000 home, we didn't levy an adjacent waste in 24-25, so this would actually be an increase of just about $4.53. For a $250,000 home, which is a little bit more realistic, it's about $11.33 that we're asking for from the primary rate. So as I mentioned before, these rates and these levies were incorporated in the previous presentation, which still means that taxpayers will spend $11 less on primary property taxes than last year, even by adding the adjacent waste tax to the tax bill for next school year. So I will, short and sweet, I will take any questions. Well, comments, since it's public hearing.
This is a public hearing for the Truth in Taxation Notice of Tax Increase. Members of the public may speak during the Truth in Taxation Fiscal Year 25-26 Adjacent Waste Property Tax Levy Public Hearing portion of the agenda. The board president or clerk shall be responsible for recognizing speakers and for maintaining proper order by setting such limitations as may be appropriate. Speakers during the public hearing should restrict their remarks to topics related to Truth in Taxation Fiscal Year 25-26 Adjacent Waste Property Tax Levy. Speakers are encouraged to be brief with a maximum time of 3 minutes. Individuals speaking before the board shall observe rules of propriety and good conduct and refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. We do not have any speakers for this. Oh, we do? Oh, sorry. Lillian Fox, you have 3 minutes.
President Ekstrom, members of the board, Yolanda Barboa, and Superintendent Trujillo and Councilor Ross. Okay, I wouldn't agree to additional taxes on anybody, because if you look at the budget book, there's so much missing information. He stood here and told you, well, those naughty elementary schools, they lost so many students, we had to cut their budgets. Yeah, okay, but what formula did he use? He's never shown you the staffing chart. Is he requiring 106 kids in kindergarten, or what's he doing? The board is supposed to approve that document every year so you know where the money's going. You've never seen it. He's never posted it. Also, when the naughty elementary schools got their budgets cut, the departments got a $66.6 million increase. Why aren't the departments being cut if we're losing an enrollment? And why isn't somebody really frightened that we're losing that many elementary kids? If you're losing that many elementary kids, the rest of your schools are going downhill too. The department's got a total increase of $157 million over 2 years. Now, when you look at the budget book, he has removed a whole bunch of critical information. You can't see the staffing chart to tell what the class sizes are, how many counselors, how many monitors, how many custodians. You can't see any of that stuff because he didn't give you the staffing chart. He's also removed it from the budget book. When you look at the individual departments, or individual schools, it no longer tells you if they have a librarian, if they have any nurses, if they have counselors, even if they have a principal or an assistant principal. It just says classified and certified, and then it says teachers, but it doesn't tell you what kind of teachers are. Are they ex-ed? You know, what are they? Are they reading recovery? And then you look at the departments, same thing. You can't tell how many directors they have. So there's no way to tell if TUSD has a single reading recovery teacher or even a single math recovery teacher budgeted for next year. You also can't tell how many zillion directors they have. They probably have more directors than they have reading recovery and math recovery teachers, because last year you only had 12 math recovery teachers for 40,000 kids, and something like 35 reading recovery teachers, which is ridiculous. So in this budget, he's removed critical information that you could have used to figure out what the district was doing, despite the fact that the staffing chart wasn't given to you. Never allow him ever to stand here and tell you blah, blah, if he hasn't given you a staffing chart. You've got to see that. You've got to know the class sizes. Last year, the class sizes for kindergartens were 26 kids per kindergarten. You didn't like that number. Heck, it could be 106 this year, because he's never shown you the staffing chart. Also, the department's got an increase in the number of employees they had. It wasn't just a whole bunch of money. They also got more people. At the same time, elementary schools were being cut. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next is item 9.1, the approval of fiscal year 25-26 adjacent ways property tax levy. Governing board members, any questions? Ms. Luna Rose.
Yeah, just a couple. Thank you for the presentation. So, yeah, actually, I think it's 1A and 1B. Most of them are sidewalks. Obviously, they're ingress and egress. First question, how come we can't pull it from bond?
I mean, we can pull it from bond. These aren't projects that we slated for bond because adjacent ways can pay for them. But they are not, we didn't put these as bond projects. Since most of these are just improvements, they're essentially building repairs more than anything. So, I mean.
It would be 2.6 being taken away from the bond.
That's the other part is we'd have to reallocate $2.6 million away from existing bond programs in order to support these sidewalks.
Okay. And then did the schools, did they come and say, like, is it like sidewalk buckling and those sort of things?
This is an assessment that facilities does. So a lot of it does come from either schools reporting that, hey, my sidewalk is buckling, or roots have started kind of pushing out, the sidewalks, or it's crumbling. Some of it is facilities itself going in there and doing facilities condition surveys, since they actually do have to do those. So it's a variety of sources of information that ultimately inform what projects they're going to do and which ones are the most critical ones. These are the ones that were recommended by the facilities department.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I have 2A and 2B. Okay. So is facilities the one doing the repair, or are we contracting out for that?
We contract these out.
Okay.
Yes.
It's just local contractor that's, like a masonry?
It's a procurement. We go through procurement, so it may or may not be local.
Okay. Hopefully local, that'd be
I
nice.
mean, hopefully, but we're
Yeah.
not allowed to provide preference over local to non-local.
Correct. And then my last question, 25% contingency. Can you explain that a little bit?
Cost overruns, whether that be labor or the cost of materials. We're talking tariffs on anything. So we always build a contingency budget into these projects because there may be cost overruns or things that we may not know are happening once sidewalks are removed or things are taking place during the project construction.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Romero?
So is this just a one-year levy?
This is a one-year levy.
Okay. When was the last time we did an adjacent waste levy?
FY '24, so 2 years ago.
24.
Yeah.
Is it roughly about that same amount, or do the facilities go through?
It's been about 2 million. Yeah, so it's about $2 million.
So, and then before that, has it kind of been something we've done every other year, just as needed?
It's as needed. It depends, because one of the things that we're allowed to do is that we can levy for the fund. If we don't spend 100% of the dollars that are left can still be used without levying for it. So we may have projects that we'll still fund with adjacent ways, like I mentioned the sewer line at Tucson High. We did that this past fiscal year with some adjacent ways dollars that we had on hand. We didn't levy for it. It is cash on hand it happens. Whether it's because there's a cost underrun, we also get delinquent tax payments because this is all entirely tax levy funded. So it just depends on how much income is collected and how much of it is used. That determines, when we use it, but it's dependent on the need that we've got out there.
And then, like I said, facilities goes out and checks the different schools. And then, I guess, are they discussing with the principals on some of these different projects, potential projects, when they're out there? Do you have any idea, or they got to talk to Greg?
I mean, you could get more detail from Greg, but yeah, they're obviously always talking to that principal to let them know what's going to happen in regards to, hey, this is when we're coming in to do a specific project around a sidewalk, a sewer. Obviously, the more disruptive it's going to be, whether it's going to be to the students or to the families coming into the campus, we want to make sure that we're letting those principals know what's going to take place at their schools.
And are these, like some of these bigger ones, again, with the bus and the fire lane type of things, are these summertime projects, or could they be any time during the year because there's multiple?
Yeah, they could be any time of the year. I know that one of the foci has been to try to do these during breaks, right? Fall break, kind of knock out a whole set of these. Depends on the complexity of them, right? Like the Robinson parking lot, the Robinson parking lot that's in there. That's going to be a big project. We obviously don't want anybody on campus. That more than likely would take place around like a fall break or a winter break. So it depends on the disruptive nature of that project to determine whether it's done when students and faculty are on campus, or we do it when nobody's around.
And do all these projects, are they planned to get done the same year?
That is my understanding. That would be a Greg question, but that is my understanding.
Okay, and who did you say approves these facilities?
The Arizona School Facilities Board. Yeah.
Okay, so they would come down and do a walkthrough of all?
No, they don't necessarily come down. We send them all of the project information that they require, so quotes and schematics, designs, engineering, everything that needs to take place in order to make that project happen. We send that to SFD, and they make that determination. They can certainly come down if they want to do that. I don't necessarily think that happens.
But say we give them all that information about Bloom, and they say, no, Bloom's fine.
Then we go forward. Yeah. Literally, if you click on that link on that presentation, it's literally a large spreadsheet on a website, and they will send us an email saying, good to go, and they'll publish it saying it's good, and we'll move forward. So they're a little bit less complex than the building renewal ones that are a little bit more involved. We're talking about roofs and stuff like that. These are, they're important projects, but they're much smaller in scale. So generally, it's just you're good to go, especially considering that we're spending our own money and we're not requesting state money to do these.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you. And so, some of these projects like Catalina and even Dodge, I just don't remember their sidewalks needing a lot of help. And we're talking about the sidewalks adjacent to the street, right? Not the ones within the school campus.
Right, correct.
And so what happens if some of these projects don't get approved? Where does that money go? Does it go back to our constituents if that money is not needed?
So we can do it one of both ways. The money can, right away, the money reverts right back to the Adjacent Waste Fund. When when we do the calculation for property tax rates, we can offset that to, whatever money is left in there against the tax levy for the taxpayers and reduce it. I'll be honest with you, $2 million on a tax levy is probably less than a penny. But there is a way for us to be able to say, here taxpayer, John Q. Public, we're sending this back to you in the form of a tax decrease, assuming that everything else is going down, right? That it's not going to be offset by other functions of the tax rate formula. So there is a way to send it back to the taxpayer if that's something that happens. We don't really do that. We generally, like I mentioned before, if that money stays in that fund, we will spend it on other projects without having to come back to you for another levy because there's cash on hand to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Romero?
So on the previous one that we did, and again, I know you're not going to be able to remember which schools were done. I guess the impact that it had at those certain schools, like we have a handful right over here, did it do what we were hoping that it would do?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, trying to make some of those sidewalks, for example, accessible for, disabled persons, right? Like the little ramps and stuff like that. Things of that nature. Some of them are big, parking lot projects, sewer, or flood control projects. So one of the projects that's in there, I believe, is Pister. They've got a huge flood control issue in their parking lot, right? And so we want to make sure that we're not destroying that parking lot with water because it's got a retention basin underneath it. And so there is a long-term benefit to these campuses in the end because we're trying to either prevent something from happening or fixing an issue that could then become something down the road, like access for disabled persons to a sidewalk, let's say.
Now, just out of curiosity, if for some reason we don't upkeep those areas and somebody like that maybe not accessible handicap-wise, or people trip and fall all the time, but there's no liability for us if they're outside of our school property, or is there? Maybe
I don't know.
Rob's.
I will leave that to Mr. Ross. He's got the JD, I don't.
Would you mind stating that again?
So just from a legal point of view, our responsibility for upkeep of sidewalks, and I know we'd mentioned parking lots and things of that nature. If somebody, say there was a pothole in the parking lot, someone wasn't paying attention, tripped and fell, hurt themselves on it, or walking down one of our sidewalks, is that two different things? Are we liable if it's in our own parking lot and not maintaining that versus being on a a sidewalk outside of our schools?
So the parking lot is a pretty easy answer. That's on us. The sidewalk is an interesting one. If we have undertaken, for example, like Ricky said, to put curb cuts in for accessibility, and perhaps we didn't do that appropriately and someone's injured, that's going to be on us. A buckling sidewalk, which we see a lot here on Fifth, right? If that's in front of one of our schools and it's something that we know is a path for our students, that's probably a shared responsibility with us and the city. So at least that's what I would be saying if I was someone representing someone who was injured. If we know that's a path that our students take and one of our students is injured, then that's why that's why we're justified in using these funds for ingress and egress to our schools. But let's say we get hit with an injury on that. As the district's lawyer, I would be looking for contribution from the city. So that the sidewalk could be a shared responsibility. Parking lots are on us. And then there's also the sidewalks that are on our property, right? So a sidewalk that's next to a bus bay, that's our property, that's our responsibility. But the ones that are like just outside the fence over here on Howell, right? That to me, that would be a shared responsibility.
And does the city usually help pay for any of these types of things, or because we're taking care of it on our end? I don't know who did the sidewalk first.
We've had some, I know I've had agreements with Mr. Nodine to review where we're undertaking a joint effort to fix, for example, crossing areas where our students cross. And we'll have agreements that we'll share in those.
right, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Luna Rose.
I would like to move the item.
I'll second.
A motion has been made by Ms. Luna Rose and seconded by Dr. Shaw. Roll call, please.
Dr. Ravi,
Yes.
Ms. Luna Rose,
Yes.
Ms. Shaw,
Yes.
Mr. Romero,
Yes.
Ms. Ekstrom.
Yes, motion passes. Thank you. Item number 10.1, future meeting dates and agenda items. Dr. Trujillo?
President Ekstrom, members of the governing board, we will be back here in a week's time. I do want to alert the board that our wonderful board docs, governance software, will be migrating to a new product, Diligent, and I will be presenting the board with some options for a study session so that the Diligent folks can come in and train the board on the new software. I'll be working with Mrs. Barboa on that, and we hope that next week we'll have some dates for which the board can choose for its public study session.
Great, thank you. Any other discussion? If not, the meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.